The evolution of Thanksgiving. Americans rated Thanksgiving as their second favorite vacations after Christmas, so it looks like no surprise from football games to filling to the Macy's parade. Thanksgiving is both uniquely American and an ample of cherished traditions. But this rosy resemblance of modern festivities leaves out of the evolutions of Thanksgiving, and there's only one way to find it out. Let's begin with our video. Most of what we understand about early American settlers succeeds from the journal of William Bradford, who was the first governor of Plymouth, Massachusetts. He reported that in 1620, the Mayflower carried the Pilgrims to Plymouth Rock, where they founded a colony and started farming. The subsequent year, they had a bountiful productions and agreed to give thanks for the food with a 3-day festivity. Historical documents indicate that there was definitely a meeting between the Pilgrims of Plymouth Colony and the Wampanoag people at this time. But surprisingly, the Native Americans weren't privileged guests. On the contrary, they possibly weren't even persuaded. Many historians believe that Wampanoag fighters heard the celebratory gunshots and cries from Pilgrim settlements. The Wampanoag concluded that they were under invasion. Because they had a prudent treaty of common defense with the Pilgrims, they dispatched 90 soldiers to the settlers' aid. And this was all explained by Amy Jacober, who is the Senior Communications Officer for the First Nations Development Institute, which is a nonprofit devoted to consolidating Native American communities and economies. So, Thanksgiving is a national holiday commemorated in many countries worldwide as it signifies the verge of the autumn season and indicates gratitude for the fall harvest. Various nations have traditions and dates that differ for this occasion, but most are very identical. The preponderance of individuals contributing to Thanksgiving spend this time with their families and have a huge feast. Some places that comprehend the holiday or have an occasion with a relevant theory are the United States of America, Norfolk Island, Canada, and Liberia, which all have almost similar customs for Thanksgiving. In expansion, Germany, Japan, Grenada, China, South Korea, and Vietnam have distinct beliefs of their harvest festivity. You can see that the Thanksgiving traditions can be traced back to harvest celebrations when the Pilgrims from England and the Native Americans confronted and gave thanks for a bountiful production. A 3-day harvest celebrations was organized in Plymouth Colony, which today form a portion of Massachusetts, back in 1621. And it is contemplated as the first American Thanksgiving. The Pilgrims initially prepared in Plymouth in 1620, but they needed to carry more food, and half of the colony died during that winter from 1620 to 1621, as it was too late to plant harvests. In the spring of 1621, the colonists were instructed on how to cultivate corn and other vegetables by the Wampanoag Indians, who furthermore demonstrated to the Pilgrims how to cook corn as well as cranberries and squash. They were furthermore taught how to master chasing and fishing. In the fall of 1621, the Pilgrims and local Wampanoag Indians assembled for a feast of wild turkeys, fish, ducks, geese, shellfish, dried fruits, corn, and green vegetables to commemorate the season's substantial harvest. Wampanoag chief Massasoit and his people brought venison. The first Thanksgiving was just the outset of a long narrative of interactions between American Indians and immigrants. The dinner embedded in the American consciousness depicts much more than an easy harvest celebration. It was a turning point in history. The first Thanksgiving was observed by an extensive period of injustice and war between Native Americans and Europeans. Many Native Americans recognized Thanksgiving as a national day of mourning. Sharing agricultural proficiency was one element of early American Indian undertakings to live alongside Europeans. However, as connections with the newcomers thrived into tournaments for land and resources, the committees needed to be more consistently profitable in their undertakings to coexist. In September 1789, the initial Federal Congress ratified a resolution inquiring former President George Washington to propose a day of Thanksgiving to the nation. Later, in 1863, former President Abraham Lincoln motivated the Americans to caption the last Thursday of November as a day of Thanksgiving. Finally, in 1870, Congress enacted legislations to make Thanksgiving a national holiday. In December 1941, President Franklin D. Roosevelt altered Thanksgiving to the fourth Thursday in November to prevent confusion in years where there was a fifth Thursday in November. He furthermore disputed that this modification narrowly expanded the holiday season, which was reasonable for the economy. Contemplating Black Friday is almost a holiday in and of itself. It's prudent to say he was right. The first Thanksgiving bore a tiny similarity to what we would understand as the traditional Thanksgiving today, some 4 centuries later. The occasion was a harvest festivity with a blend of spiritual, pagan, and practical beliefs dating back centuries. The pious pilgrims centered the festivity around Thanksgiving prayers and appreciations to God for their bounty. Still, they had bonfires, Thanksgiving music, food, and gunshots that bought the attentions of the Native Americans. Contrary to what you might have known in elementary school, this was no potluck meal where pilgrims hung detailed Thanksgiving symbols and Native Americans got the roasted turkey. But there was a meeting, and they did share a dinner together according to Bradford. The Wampanoag Nation brought deer, and there was some category of cooked fowl, although it was probably a duck, not turkey. They furthermore ate cranberries, pumpkin, vegetables, and cornmeal, but not in the aspect of pumpkin pie. The tradition of Thanksgiving marginalized the fact of what really occurred in North America. We need to comprehend, acknowledge, and share that true history. Only by accomplishing so can we move toward recovery and reconciliations between Native people and European colonizers. As the nation became more urban and family members started to live farther apart, Thanksgiving became a time to assemble together. The holiday shifted from its spiritual roots to entitle immigrants of every background to partake in a widespread tradition. Thanksgiving Day football games, starting with Yale versus Princeton in 1876, encouraged the fans to expand some rowdiness to the holiday. In the late 1800s, parades of costume celebrants became widespread. In 1920, Gimbel's department store in Philadelphia organized a parade of about 50 people with Santa Claus at the back of the procession. Since 1924, the annual Macy's Parade in New York City has preceded the tradition, with enormous balloons in 1927. The holiday correlated with pilgrims and Native Americans has exemplified intercultural peace, America's chance for newcomers, and the sanctity of home and family. Now let's talk about how Thanksgiving evolved in Canada. You will find that the days of Thanksgiving in Canada also emerged in the colonial period, ensuing from the exact European traditions in appreciations for safe trips, peace, and bountiful productions. The earliest festivity was held in 1578 when an excursion was directed by Martin Frobisher, and they held a processions in present-day Nunavut to give thanks to the protections of its fleet. In 1879, Parliament organized a National Thanksgiving Day on November 6, but the date has varied. Since 1957, Thanksgiving Day has been commemorated in Canada on the second Monday in October. While turkey is today the bird of choice for Thanksgiving feasts across the United States, this was not constantly the case according to History.com. For the first ever Thanksgiving in 1621, the Native Americans slaughtered 5 deer as a souvenir for the colonists, meaning venison would most probably have been the dish of the day. You might have seen that each Thanksgiving, the President of the United States pardons a hand-selected turkey, delivering it to a farm where it lives out of the rest of its day. But opposite to prominent belief, President George H.W. Bush was not in 1989 the first president to consent to such a pardon. This tradition dates to Abraham Lincoln's day when his son Ted asked him to compose a presidential pardon for the bird implied for the family's Christmas table, contending it had as much a right to reside as anyone. Lincoln accepted, and the turkey lived. Let's talk about how it is celebrated in other nations. In Germany, the traditions are identical to America, but it's commemorated in October. The festivity is very sacred and full of appreciation. In Japan, Thanksgiving arose from the harvest festival of Niname no Matsuri, which is the ritual authorized by the emperor. It's called Labor Thanksgiving Day and is commemorated in November. The name was provided post-World War II. Shortly, children make greeting cards for civil helpers. The day witnessed families' meals and national holidays. And in the United Kingdom, the harvest festivity of Thanksgiving in the UK is closest to the American festival. Upon the culminations of harvest, the families and friends dine together and have a remarkable time. So that's it for today. What do you think of the Thanksgiving ritual and its significance? Let us know in the comments below and subscribe for more.